We've got another VCR to look at today. This is the start of a different series, the G series. We've got the NV-G7, and this is a different form factor to the VCRs we've been looking at previously, the ones that were 3 digits in the part number. You can see that this is quite narrow. We look at the front of the one we looked at previously, NV-788, which I haven't put it back together yet. You can see that this here is narrower. The width has been reduced and the internal layout of components has changed a bit to allow that. And I've got a whole bunch of different models in this G range, so we'll progressively work through all of those. And we're going to start with the lowest number that I have here. I don't know if there are lower numbers than that. There might be. I don't have all of them in the series, but I have 6 or 8 of them. We'll find out as we progress along. Let's take a look at the front. You can see it is a new generation. I think this is starting in the mid-80s. Still more or less the same thing we're used to seeing, the standby VTR switch, eject, tape transport controls. I don't think this has many special features. There's a pause. It's got infrared remote control. It's got record, and there's this nice panel here which is held by magnets, covering up additional controls. The TV tuner controls are now in front accessible, no longer a little panel on the top. And then there's the clock set and programming, which uses those buttons there. I think they've simplified the way you program it. You like push program, click what day you want it on, click what channel you want, when you want it to start, when you want it to stop, and then when you finish you put that on and it will do program recording. There's tracking control and there's a picture soft sharpness, and then over here there's the counter, tape counter reset, and memory search lock function. So you don't get still advance or slow motion or anything like that by the look of it, unless that was a feature on the remote only. Just pause. So on the back, not much is different to what we've been seeing before. There's video and audio input, there's video and audio output, there's the color mode select switch, RF in and output. Alright, let's take this thing apart and have a look inside it. We'll power it up and see if it works, and explore the circuits. There's only one screw on each side now to remove the cover. Is that for easier access for servicing? Let's take a look in here. It's got the service manual, and apparently there's a training manual for this model. Unfortunately I don't have it. Some of the features in this are auto operation, so that means it will automatically turn itself on when you push a cassette tape into it, and playing back automatically, which means that if the record prevention tab is removed, then it will enter play automatically when the cassette is inserted. And it says turning itself to eject when the eject button is pressed during power off mode. Okay, so if it's off and you push eject, it will turn on and eject. And also doing an eject if you put it into the timer record mode with a tape that has the tab removed, so that you know that it's not going to be able to record. It says that in these features, in addition to the basic PAL VHS format, make the unit an ideal one for your culture and entertainment. So you can be cultured by this. Some notes. We are pleased to inform you how to make easier servicing. Packed circuits. There's extra boards. It's saying you can take boards off of one side of the PCB, the main PCB, and then install them on the other side. We need to have a look at that. So there's summary instructions, and then it goes into taking it apart and doing mechanical adjustments and electrical adjustments, and then it goes into the schematics, PCB layouts, And then there'll be some exploded views and other bits and pieces. Very good. Let's look inside the real thing. So the main difference that we see in this series of VCRs is there's now just one main board, and it sits in this sort of L shape in that area around the mechanical section and the power supply over here. This still has transformer, but the later G series, it used a switch mode power supply, and that brings a lot of exciting problems now that they're old. Little cover over the head still seems to be alright. Yeah, a lot of the mechanical stuff in this is the same as in the other series of VCRs. Let's power this up and see what it does. Comes on. Ooh. It's probably going to work fine. Very, very weak take up, so it might chew the tape. Yeah, the usual problem, which is that idler tire thing is worn out and no longer grippy, so it can't turn the reels very easily. Oh, that's interesting. If you turn that, it seems to think there's a tape in, or something happened. Anyway, it seems to go into play mode alright. Perhaps we should give it a go on a tape, with a tape, and then we'll take it apart a lot more to investigate the internals. Connect video out. Alright, we'll try this somewhat sacrificial tape in it and see what happens. It might get chewed up. Yeah, see, barely any take up. Oh no, maybe. It's going to be chewing the tape. Now that's a shame, isn't it? Yeah, we might have to do something about that before we can get much more out of this. It looked like it was trying to work. You can do it without taking more of it off, more of it apart. And there's a little split washer thing down in there, which you can see there, which holds this thing in place. So if you get that off, you can then wipe it down a bit, or ideally replace it, but wipe it down with some isopropyl alcohol and then hope that it will grip for a little while. But yeah, that's not a solution really, it's just a temporary fix. I tried doing it without taking it apart. Can't actually get in there enough. Turn the capstan shaft. You can feel there's a bump on this roller where it's been sitting. It's probably not going to be enough, is it? Oh, look at that. We got a little bit out of it. It's sort of working, but a little bit to try pulling on the back tension there to see if that changes anything. That's often something that is upset. Yeah, so the pause is a very basic one where a noise bar will stay on the screen. It doesn't try and adjust for that. But that's alright, it still gives a pretty clear picture when you're pausing it. Well, good basic VCR. Oops, except I pushed eject. Did it wind the tape in? Did wind the tape in. Didn't look like it was going to, so we got lucky. I was going to try and hold it in and change the mode to rewind or fast forward to pull the tape in. If it didn't, so we've seen some basic operation. Let's take a look inside it. Now, the servicing method to get all this open is you need to take the front off, unfortunately, because the board on the front is part of this. You can see there are hinges there, and there's a red screw there and there, and there. Now we need to check underneath what we need to do, and we also need to do some stuff on the back. So instead of being a big metal plate on the bottom, it's just in the mechanical area. So we'll take a look under that. This is a bit more refined. The capstan motor is now quite heavily reliant on the die-cast chassis to hold everything in the right position. It's just a PCB with the coils on it, and one belt there, which can also go slippy. Loading motor here, it's quite a thin one, and yeah, another belt there that will be slipping. And interesting, they get a flex PCB there. So let's take a look at that while we're here. Quite an interesting refined motor design, done in a way that makes it quite difficult to use this for other purposes because it's all integrated in. So that will come off. Plate there. And the stator part with the coils on it sits over that. And yeah, it's not actually a whole flex PCB, but for some reason they've done that. And it's been soldered down to this, which is just a regular single-sided PCB with the coils on it, and there's hall sensors in there for position feedback, and then there's the that one there for sensing the rotation, for synchronizing with the head and getting the tracking right. So that's pretty interesting. Now, because we've taken the bottom off, we can now get the front off, because there were two screws there shared with clips from the front and the bottom panel. So we can unclip those. And then on the top there are clips as well. Then the front is off. Now what we have to do is undo all the boards on the front. So there's a bunch more red screws there. I guess the reason they've done it like this is to reduce cabling and connectors. It's all part of cost down. One more red screw over here. This is a flex connector thing, and then a kind of weird ribbon cable-y thing there between those two boards. I guess that's to do with economizing the PCB panel size. Split it into two. Now we need to undo some stuff on the back, because there are screws here and here which are holding this RF panel in. So those need to be undone. Now what we should be able to do is lift all of this up, hinged by here. I think, as long as I haven't forgotten anything. Except we need to be careful because there's some cables. Let's just unplug them, so it'll be easier than unclipping them. So this is a power regulator there. That's a Darlington transistor, and that's used to keep the head drum slightly warm. You see what happened there? All the stuff lifted up, and then there's this plastic strip thing which clicks into that back edge of the housing to stop the boards from flopping down again. So they'll keep out of your way while you're working on it. Now you can see there's one large ribbon cable that goes to the mechanism, and then there's a thinner one here which goes to the tape loading mechanism. Now to remove the tape loading mechanism, there's two screws, one there and one down there. which I think are somewhat retained. They won't come out. So you loosen those off, then that will lift up and should push forward a bit because there's some hooks there which go under little metal hooks there and there. So that's out of the way. So that can be run like that now. Load a tape in there and then work on the mechanism. Or if you're really brave, you can pull that out and hope that you'll be able to put that back in without the stabilizer bit on the back cracking off as soon as you apply force to it. Little bit annoying thing that happens now that these things are old. So that's a self-contained loading mechanism. The motor is on there, so you don't have to worry about timing it to the rest of the mechanism. Something we're going to have to deal with when we get to the higher models of this series. So now we get full access to the mechanism so that we can work on it. Something that needs to be watched for, especially in these old things, is these types of levers. Especially that one where it's got this kind of sleeve bearing. The grease in there will go really stiff, and then this will get pushed out and then never come back. And then when you try and take your tape out, it's going to get stuck because it's still pulled around that, and then there'll be problems. And so in that case, you got to undo that, clean it out, re-lubricate it and put it back, and then get the height set correctly, which might not be very easy to do. Alignment jigs and things like that. The other thing that's going to happen is the back tension band that one seems to be in pretty good order. The felt strip on it is still there, and this is one of the older ones where the felt strip is short. Newer ones, it comes all the way to the end and gets crimped in to the end so it can't fall off. These ones here, after a while, they will come off, and through the movement of the reels, the felt bit will get pushed away, and then there's nothing restricting the supply reel, and the tape will slacken, and then you either lose the audio or the picture will go bad, or both. Usually audio goes bad because it's just not quite touching the audio head in the right place. Something very important to note is to take off the video head amp, you need to use the proper number 2 JIS screwdriver. It's really important on these because no other screwdriver will be able to undo that screw without applying too much force and bending that piece of metal out of the way. So you've got to use the right one. You listen to this. The amount of turning needed to get that to crack open was enough to twist the metal. So if you didn't have a screwdriver that perfectly locked into that screw, there's no way you'd be able to do it because you'd have to push down far too hard and that metal will just collapse out of the way and then the screw head will be destroyed. So you've got to use the correct JIS number 2 screwdriver for those 2 screws. Critical importance. I don't know why they're so tight, and also don't know why they used such really long screws for just going through like barely 1.5mm steel. But that's what they did, and it's like that in heaps of models, and it's really easy to destroy those screws and never be able to undo them. Yeah, that's the head amp. There'll be an IC on the other side there that makes that work. Amplify the RF signal. I guess it's also head switching, isn't it? Okay, I think what we were getting at before is the boards fold out and rest there nicely so that they can be worked on. You can take measurements, but that interesting thing it said in the service manual was you could, to allow easier access to this board here, they're talking about the luminance chrominance board, which I think is this one here. They called it a packed circuit. Packed. There's often weird translation issues in these manuals and they can be quite hard to understand. But it's saying there how to make easier servicing of a packed circuit. In case of checking packed circuits such as luminance and chrominance pack, audio pack, TV demodulator pack, and so on, you may install then, it should be them, on the other side of the circuit board, the foil side. At that time, remove the packed circuit board carefully, not to damage anything, and reinstall on the foil side, keeping the relation of each connection correctly. because these packed circuits, these things here, are all connected by single inline headers. You can see the white thing there of those. And so what you could do is desolder it, suck out all those solder connections, pull the board out, and flip it over and poke it into this side, and then carefully solder along there, and then you'll be able to run it with the board on this side so that you can probe it. But I think you're going to have a pretty big problem when you come to remove it and put it back on the correct side. How are you going to get in to suck these out? Because it's not through-hole plated, and depending on how eagerly you've soldered it, it's going to flow around the pad and be extremely difficult to remove. So I'd say don't do that, because you're likely to rip off a whole bunch of these pads by not having them removed correctly and then pulling on it to get it out. Anyway, that's a thing. So on this, there is some servo stuff. There's power supply, there's a power regulator there, which I think is similar to what we saw on a previous VCR. Then there's servo stuff, which seems to go up to here, motor driver there, and then there's a system control section in here with a microcontroller, and then the motor driver for the loading motor and the tape loading motor. And there's a little extra board for some things, and then there's luminance chrominance board there, which has got, that's a board soldered into the main board, but then it's also got sub boards on that. See that? It's an aluminum backed flex board where it flexes down the center, folds in half, and then solders through a slot into this PCB. And it's got surface mount stuff on it. Pretty high-end stuff for the 80s. I guess that has a pretty good shielding because it's a thin flex board with metal backing on it. There's a couple of those in there. And then power transformer over there, which has got some rectifiers, I think, and a little bit of regulation on it. And then the wire that comes over goes into that power supply section there. And then final bits here, ribbon cables that go over to the clock board, and you can see, well, yeah, the control panel board, VFD on there. It's got another quite big IC underneath the VFD, so that's probably deals with the timer operations and driving VFD. And then the infrared remote receiver in a little box. It's still the older style, which is quite discreet, not all integrated into one little plastic blob. Yeah, reinserting these cables, these ribbons, you got to be careful because now they're old. That blue thing will just peel off when you try and touch it or bend it, so be careful. There's a supercapacitor there for keeping the clock running if the power's off. Now another thing is, if you want to run this with the board folded out, you're going to have to untie these cables that clip out, so those can come out. And then there's this twist open thingy, so those can come down, and then they will reach. Head amp and the audio cable there. Yeah, I guess what that little subboard there was, the packed circuit was the audio. And that one goes into there. Yeah, it's a PCB mounted header socket thing which plugs into a connector that would normally take this type of cable going into it. Great. Is that us? Quick and easy. It'll just fold down again once you're done. Be back in perfect original working order. So there you go, that was a fairly brief look inside the National NV-G7 VHS VCR. Start of the G series, of which I think we got the G10 next, pretty sure. So stay tuned for that, and probably a bunch of other things that will happen before I get to that one. See you next time.